namaste. Welcome back for another cup of tea. Today is an interview with one of my greatest inspirations ever, which is Colleena Shakti. We're going to talk about her journey in dance, Indian classical dance, fusion dance, Indian fusion, and also some advices, ideas, and inspirations on how to create a solo and how to approach fusion dance style. For those new to this channel, I'm Lamia Barbara and I've been teaching dance and yoga internationally for the last 10 years. If you like this video, please subscribe and take a look at my Patreon if you'd like to support my work. Enjoy!
First thing first, thank you so much for being here for this little chat together. And and my first question is, first I want always to know a little bit more about how did we actually started in dance? How did dance came into your life? And Odyssey or belly dance or dance in general, like a little bit maybe about your story.
Yeah. Okay, it's a good starting point. So I'll try to give maybe the synopsis. I danced as a child, a little bit ballet, jazz dance in the 80s, tap dance. I was raised in California, in Southern California. So, so those dances were in my childhood, but not anything serious until I was in college and I discovered belly dance first. That's really what sparked my interest in dance. So at the time, I was kind of experiencing a very punk rock, anarchist, activist phase of my life, and belly dance to me was extreme activism in a feminist sense. Like just first time I actually appreciated my own body just through the movements and the curves of the movement. So it was, I mean, so many belly dancers kind of have this story. It just really was like this revelation. I grew up in Southern California, not in Hollywood, but certainly there's this influence in the 90s of, you know, the Baywatch babe kind of in my periphery, and I never really was that. So belly dance was just a way for me to kind of rethink femininity. Um, and that is still the most important theme for me in why I choose belly dance or whatever we're going to call it. Um, and then I because I was so interested in that, there was no way to train in belly dance in those days. I was taking a class at a community college, and it was quite um, how do we say it, like hobbyist. But I was so serious about it. I was so devoted to it. And so in college, I was taking West African dance and ballet, thinking somewhere in the middle was belly dance technique, and somehow both would kind of help me in my journey. And then in a class in college, it was a survey of traditional dances of Southeast Asia. And we kind of went through Javanese, Balinese, we got to India, okay, Bharatanatyam, and then we arrived at Odissi. And I just remember that day in class, I, I just kind of like everything just came crashing down. And I don't know why, but I just became obsessed with it. Um, and so I spent the time I should have been spending on my studies in the library. This is before internet. There was nothing on the internet about Odissi. So there was one book in the University of Oregon library, and I would go and look at those pictures every day and read it cover to cover. Um, and it really captivated me. So it took a few years. I started Odissi classes with Ratna Roy in Seattle, and then finally, I bought a one-way ticket to India. I think I had just turned 21, and I thought, I'm going for a whole year and I'm going to learn this dance. You know how ridiculous that is because I do Indian dance. Um, so obviously, I hadn't experienced too deeply Odissi because I thought 1 year was going to, make a dent in my in my learning. And then, of course, in India, I mean, this is a whole story. It was very challenging in that first period. Very few foreigners, at least in the circle that I was in. I think like just a couple foreigners had ever even been there. I mean, like people hadn't really even seen foreigners in the neighborhood where I was staying. Nobody spoke English. There was no system. uh, I was thrown in the class with teenage boys, and trained with teenage boys who, of course, were. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Gotipo tradition of
Of course,
Orissa,
yeah.
but it's like how they train young boys is very specific. Um, so that was just very, very uncomfortable, and very uncomfortable for me, not really knowing anything about Indian culture. Suddenly, like getting scolded for not wearing a dupatta, and just feeling like, how to dress, how to eat, how to talk, how to do everything was new for me. Um, and so on a break, I took a break from studying in Orissa, Odissi dance, where Odissi comes from, and I went to Rajasthan in search of the Kalbeliya because I had seen their dance in Lachodram, and was so attracted to it. And then I found the Kalbeliya, and that whole story unraveled. And so then 20 years later, I've been moving between Rajasthan, focused on Rajasthani folk dance and music, and Orissa, studying classical dance, so very tribal folk dance and very classical codified, very religious dance, I would say. And then in the very hot summers of Rajasthan, I would take the opportunity to visit my family back in California, and kind of staying in touch with the Fusion Bellydance community, and performing and teaching in those kind of events. So that's the short version.
Wow, that's amazing. And how did the idea of the school, how did it happen? Like the school, the Shakti School of Dance.
Yeah, thanks for asking. It happened. I mean, it wasn't like I did it, it happened.
Mm,
I still consider myself a student, not a teacher, especially of Odissi, of classical Indian dance. It's so, so vast. Every day I realize it goes deeper and deeper. Um, but I was in Pushkar, where I have lived most of the last few decades, and I was walking around our beautiful Rangnatha Venugopal temple, which is a beautiful temple which combines Rajasthani architecture, so like Shakawati Haveli style, and um, painting. I mean, just beautiful chatris, like the domes and stuff. And then it mixes South Indian architecture because it is a Vaishnav temple of Lord Krishna from a South Indian sampradaya. I think the main Rangnath temple is in Andhra Pradesh.
mm,
Um, So that actually has an interesting temple dance history. But of course, in Rajasthan, there was, in recent history, I'm talking in the last few hundred years since our temple was built, there's no temple dance history. But my point is, by mentioning this, is that somehow around the atmosphere of this religious view is the idea of dance as an offering. And actually, so this day I was walking around the temple, I don't know, maybe 18 years ago. I met the owner of the temple, the trustee. His family built the temple, and so he's the guardian of the temple. And he was so impressed. He had never met a foreigner who was in India to study dance. And so he said, wow, it's amazing. You can take a room in our temple and practice your dance, because you know that dance is one of the 8 offerings that should be offered to Lord Ranganath Venugopal, this aspect of Krishna. So Rang means color. It's one of the names of Lord Krishna. It's the colorful, playful, flirtatious young years in Vrindavan kind of Krishna that is celebrated in this temple. So it just makes sense that dance is a part of that expression of bhakti, of devotion. Um, so he just gave me a room in the temple, and I began my dance practice there. I was staying in Rajasthan, but trying to keep up my Odissi studies. And then somebody came and asked what I was doing, and next thing you know, some couple people wanted classes. And then the next thing you know, I invited at the time, my teacher from Orissa. I invited him to come and do a workshop there, and I promoted it to also, I mean, to Westerners, to people that I knew who wanted to come and visit India, knew what I was doing, and they wanted to come and try it out. So we did, the first few years were really like workshops, and then it grew and grew. And this year is the first year in, I think, 18 years that I haven't had my dance season in front of Rangnath Venugopal. So anyway, he's there and he's feeling my dance, but it's a magical place, and the place really creates such a profound context around our dance, and just such a inspiring setting to practice dance. It has definitely had a big influence on on my life of dance.
Oh my God, that's a lovely story. Looks like a very, like I don't know, a dream. It's a dream. It's so lovely. Thank
Yeah, it's
you.
a dream, but it also, every dream has its like crashing reality too. I mean,
Mm.
there has been all kinds of things to navigate,
Mm.
but but in general, it's been like a dream.
Yeah. Um, so I wanted to ask you, coming from your experience, like, I don't know, maybe more than 20 years, or maybe, I don't know, even more into Odissi, um, and Indian classical dance and all of your studies, what would be for you, what do you think would be the best advice for someone who is approaching this dance for the first time? Like, what's the best maybe top 3 advices you can give to for new beginners?
Yeah, that was one of the hard questions you asked. I don't know. Hard to narrow that down. It depends who the person is. If the person is my student, I will definitely give them advice. Otherwise, if people don't ask my advice, I don't like to assert myself, but let's just pretend that it's a student asking me. um, uh, yeah, yeah, it really is a hard one. Like, what is the advice? Everybody has their own path, is the thing. What I needed to do and what I needed to realize might be different from someone else. I mean, my position in learning Indian classical dance, um, if we'll just talk about Indian classical dance, we could talk about fusion dance maybe in another sentence, but you know, my position in Indian classical dance is very specific. Being born in America, having a white complexion, not being from Orissa, da 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 da. So there's like advice to that. But anyway, classical dance is an ocean, and I think just, you know, to be patient and curious. I feel like students often get overwhelmed. I notice like somebody comes to my class, they just try out Indian classical dance and they feel like, oh my God, I didn't know I had to work so hard. And they're disturbed by it. And they think it's me, that I'm just being militant and pushy as a teacher, but it's very classical in the sense we are forging the body like metal going in the fire and melting at hot temperatures and burning and then being reshaped through pounding, repetitive pounding. I think forging is a really great analogy for the process of training as a classical dancer. And uh, so, I mean, just not to be afraid of that, and that actually it's a matter of finding your surrender in that. And with that surrender comes such a joy, actually. It's like this, just to be comfortable with that position of, I don't know anything, my body doesn't know anything, I'm going to just surrender my body and my mind over to my teacher to form it. That's really how we approach Indian classical dance, which is very different from hate to do it, but the Western, let's say the contemporary urban, slightly westernized approach of asserting self identity upon a practice. Like, I'm not comfortable with that, or I don't. I don't know why do we have to, you know, like kind of questioning so much. There's a tradition in Indian classical arts to surrender to the teacher and somehow just to be prepared. My advice is to be prepared to go through that process, and that it's a beautiful process, and it doesn't mean you surrender your power or your self-identity. It's just a more fluid way of experiencing you know, the goals of classical Indian dance. I have a short answer also, and it's my students like to quote myself back to me, and one of my quotes that they liked the most, and some of them wanted to put it on a t-shirt, it's dal, ghee, God, and practice are the key things you need as an Indian classical dancer. Dal, because it's vegetarian protein. That dal is like our superfood in India, and you need it for your muscles because you're training hard. Ghee is the number one superfood, which helps with your brain function as well as lubricating the joints in your keeping you healthy. So there's little Ayurvedic advice there. And God, because whatever that means to you, this dance is a transformative practice. So whatever that means to you, it's perfectly open to interpretation, but you need that devotional sentiment to really succeed in this dance, and you need to practice. So
Those are like the best four pillars for to sum up everything. It's perfect. Dal, ghee, God, and practice. I love it,
yeah,
and it's actually a perfect T-shirt. Like,
yeah, yeah.
well, thank you. Yeah, and I know maybe it's a very hard question, but But I think you answered very well because I perfectly relate to what you just said, like what I experienced myself, and that's perfect. I think just to
What's
surrender and sorry,
what's your answer?
what would be my answer? Whoa. Well, probably kind of the same in a sense of that we as Westerners, because we are coming from this world. I don't know. Maybe it's not the actual good word to say that Western, because it's always from our point of view. But whatever we are and where we come from, we approach dance and any kind of practice with this idea that we can grab something and in a certain time you will have that. But that certain time in India doesn't work. You need um, the usual question that I have sometimes is that, oh, how many years do you need to become a dancer, like to call yourself a dancer? And that's not something that you can actually apply to this kind of art forms because it's your whole life. I mean, you will be prepared maybe the next one or maybe three lives from now or maybe never. It's a never ending process. So to cut that idea of grabbing something of an ending point might be also good advice, just to really surrender to the process of always learning, always being inspired by something new, even the small, tiny bits of the same thing which you're repeating over and over. There is a word behind every tiny step. So to really nurture yourself from small things along the way, it's something that it's really that joy comes from that because you don't need much. You just need to appreciate and nurture yourself from all of that, which is it is never ending. So I'm
Yeah.
probably repeating myself, but
Yeah,
that's
no,
it.
I get it. I totally agree. It's a good point.
Yeah. So now coming to fusion because we mentioned it, and my next question is Indian fusion, which is not a question. It's not. It's the general topic. Because I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm asking you also. I think you were the first one to use this this um, topic, this idea, Indian fusion, into the fusion community. So my question is, how would you define Indian fusion? What is Indian fusion for you? And maybe also a little bit of what is fusion? Like, how do you see fusion? What's your vision of fusion?
Okay. That was another one of your questions I was overwhelmed with. I just have to be honest that at the moment I'm super overwhelmed with that question. And I have been asking myself that question every day of my life for at least the last 2 decades. Because again, I came from belly dance to Indian dance. And then whenever I would go back to belly dance, I mean, it was a term that people told me. They're like, oh, you're doing Indian fusion. But I remember being at Fat Chance Belly Dance Studios and I thought I was doing so great in the class. And actually, Megha, she was there at the time. She looked over at me and she just started laughing. She's like, "You just can't not do Indian dance." And I thought I was looking so ATS. And she's like, "No, no, you look like you're doing Indian dance completely. It doesn't look at all like ATS." So I was kind of told I was doing Indian fusion, um, and yeah, everybody's looking for a label and a term because, oh God, as artists, like, what am I doing? Is this jazz? Is this fusion? Um, So I have struggled so much with terminology to explain what I do. I think Indian fusion is the closest I can come, even still, because what is fusion? Fusion is I almost feel like it's a fractal, and looking at, I don't know, if you're talking about fusion, you're acknowledging the fact that everything is like a crystal, that everything has these different sides, and ways of refracting that light. And you move a crystal through the light and you'll see purple and green, and maybe if you hold it above you, you get a rainbow. You get all these different perspectives. And fusion is important to me, in my own process as a human being, because I am an expat. I am, I am not a patriot of America. I was born in America, and I clearly identified that I was different from much of the American view, and I could feel these blinders on me, leading me through life in this American, uh, assertive American viewpoint. And I was like, I want to take this off. And so that's why, one of the reasons why I chose to live in India, and I now choose to live in, and I'm a traveler. I mean, I have to travel. It's not even a question. It's like eating food. I have to travel because I have to move that crystal to another side, because I'm constantly want to question myself. So if we're talking about dance, it's like you settle into a comfortable movement vocabulary, but then go go to Bali and see how your body feels tightly wrapped in a sarong and trying to do Balinese dance, and then go to Central Asia and try to extend So I love that about traveling and about cultures, how I can see myself from different perspectives, any aspect of myself. Um, my femininity has been a big question I've asked myself in those different paradigms, like being in a Muslim household with Muslim community, and having relationships like that, and dancing with um, women from a Muslim family, and then going to a Hindu family, and how is a woman viewed, and how is dance viewed, and how do we move our body, and what are the eyes doing. And I love that, because nothing is right. It's just all different aspects of myself. So I love to dance in India and cover very appropriately. If I'm at a Rajput wedding, I cover my head, and and all of this. I really appreciate that grace of the Indian politeness of the female body. And then I also love to go, I don't know, to the beach in Sicily in my bikini. So, and all of those are part of me, and I get to express that through fusion, that there's different parts that really resonate as valuable. And so I feel like fusion is my space in dance, to tell my own life story and my own preferences. And I recognize that's a privilege. Um, and I'd like to explore that. So fusion has been an important space in my body and in my dance, because classical, you certainly behave a certain way. You are surrendering your body to be forged by the lineage. And I definitely have my own identity and experience in it. But it's very guided, you know, and kind of prepackaged. And then also folk dance. I love to, so I have folk, fusion, and classical. So if you divide my brain and my body, there's three parts. Folk is getting to experience the Indian aesthetic, but in this very um, free and funny and fun way that, you know, Rajasthani dance really has this movement vocabulary that's so free. And then fusion is that space where I can just try everything together. Like my torso moves a certain way in Odissi, and then I get to say, well, what if I did that and I did a belly dance movement? How is that going to make my body look while doing a belly dance movement, when I have an Odissi movement principle layered on top of that? And my facial expression is that of a Rajasthani dancer. So it's a space for me to kind of digest all those travels and experiences. And also, why fusion is a difficult topic is because I'm so excited that our community is finally uh, airing out some very stifled topics. So I attended gathering at the Delta this last weekend. It was initiated by Donna Mejia, but so many amazing artists were involved. And I was so excited. It's the first time that our community really just took a good look in the mirror. And we had the privilege to listen to many Menat artists speak about how they have felt marginalized by fusion. So fusion in the belly dance world um, is I don't know what to say anymore. What is fusion? It is mixing many movement vocabularies from Middle East, North Africa, Turkey, and so forth. And that I started in that dance, and at the time I started it, we really, honestly, my confession is we really came from such an Orientalist space. Like, oh, this is cool. Let me throw this headdress on and let me try this movement on this music, without any regard for the cultures we were appropriating from. And I started in that field, and like a crystal, there's many faces to that. So that is one face that I think now I have come to really identify, like, oh, I always did feel a little uncomfortable with that. And we do need to talk about that. There needs to be some limit, at least personally. I don't know if the community will ever agree on some moral guidelines of fusion, but I really believe that morality needs to be sparked in each individual artist, in the way we mix cultural dances. So um, I'll just stop there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's a very specific moment we're going through as a community, and it's a very tough, but also like important one. Like necessary, I would say. It's necessary at some point to just look around and see, okay, wait a moment. What are we doing here? Like to open our eyes and see clearly, and maybe, like make different steps with different awareness.
Yeah, I think I mean, at first, I think people are afraid of it because they think it's going to limit them and their voice. And that's one thing I've witnessed in myself as an American. One of those things I was talking about in, like, as a traveler, at least me, I'm like trying to erase my programming and constantly reprogram. And I witnessed in my own thoughts sometimes, like as an American, it's my right. I can do whatever I want, this kind of attitude. And I just have to be like, wait a second, what the hell is that? Maybe we just have to take a moment to stop and think about the impact that choice will make. And I think that's a blessing, because ultimately our art will become more deep and meaningful, thoughtful, and that is healing to the community, that is empowering to people, that is beautiful, that is the continuation of culture instead of the destruction of culture. And I'm so excited to be a part of that. It's like, instead of hiding in guilt of feeling like you're destroying a culture, it's so much more inspiring to be a part of sustaining and preserving and pushing forward and celebrating and being excited about culture. It just, it's a win-win, but it takes a moment to kind of recalibrate and, yeah, find
Yeah,
our
yeah,
steps.
yeah, definitely. And the idea of leaving a legacy, like that's what I'm seeing also. Like, okay, now we can create better foundation, stronger foundation, to on top of which we can walk all together with awareness and maybe leave a legacy for people who are coming after us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. um so my next question is more about your creativity process, like mainly about, I think, maybe Indian fusion, because probably, like Indian classical dance, as you said, is a pre-made package. I mean, you have that, and you, in the frame, you find your freedom, but there is a frame which is very specific.
Mhm.
But with fusion, that frame is more, I would say, more evanescent. I don't know if that is an English word. Uh,
Oh.
so you have many possibilities, and in your creativity process while creating a fusion solo, how do you start? How do you get inspiration? What's maybe your first step? Because I see that talking with different people in our fusion dance world, everyone will have different ways of starting. Someone starts from, like, example, from the music or from that specific patterns of a costume, and then it's inspired and it sees the dance which is coming from, or maybe the concept. I don't know. Everyone is different, so I was curious about yours.
Yeah. um uh I guess I'll just start by saying it's interesting because I've always considered myself a creative person, but I hate choreography. I hate making choreography. I hate it in the sense that I love it afterwards, but it's like this painful, almost identity crisis every time. And I look at like famous choreographers, I'm like, God, how do they make that many choreographies? It doesn't just flow from me. And it's funny because I also think of myself as kind of a rebellious person. But what I love about Indian classical dance, specifically Odissi, we have traditional choreographies that, eventually in the very, very master phases, you can choreograph. There's no rule against it, but usually we do traditional choreographies, and I've been practicing those choreographies, some of them for like 20 years. And I'm still challenged and inspired, and like, I go into this choreography that I've been in for 20 years, I've been living inside of for 20 years, and I'm like, you're just swimming so free in it. So after experiencing that, and then to go to fusion, to create a choreography, like, okay, I've got a show next month, I got to create a new choreography because everybody wants to see new. I I realized, okay, I can think of something new, a new costume, but what I actually enjoy, I realize, is just going inside that choreography that has so much space inside of it. So I've learned to accept that about myself. I felt like a failure as an artist for many years because I wasn't just coming up with new choreographies all the time. So I've been trying to repeat my choreographies and let them evolve and let space grow inside of them. But I would say the most inspiring things to me for infusion dance is paintings, sculpture, and music. I love Indian art, miniature paintings, and sculpture. And when I see, so Odissi was recreated through the help of the temple sculptures of Orissa. And so I have spent a lot of time sitting at temples and staring at these incredible, flexions of the body carved in stone, and they're really imprinted in my mind. And if you look at Odissi, it is often very two-dimensional. Like, we move side to side a lot. We have really perfect postures, and that also is imprinted in my, just my imagination. So I often will think of poses, like sculptures, maybe literally taken from a sculpture, or, oh, I love how that's profile, but the arm is, So it's perfect that you ask me this question, because we did the Indian Fusion Art Challenge inspired by beautiful paintings, and I was like, oh, this is perfect, because this is my thing. I usually, I'll look at a painting or some work of art, and I'll take a pose and then kind of imagine how it links in. um, and and that's usually, I mean, that's kind of the start of my uh, creative process, is finding the static postures, which I kind of think of as pillars of a structure, and then filling it in from there. And then, of course, the music has so much influence. I just try to really listen to the music and find the 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 variations, and play on that.
Hmm. That's lovely. And well, just a little side note, because you just made me remember that at university we're studying traditional Asian theater dance treatise. That's how they say, like the traditional texts from Asian theater dances. And one thing that our professor said was that we usually think of a treatise. Is that English treatise, like text?
Treaties.
Huh?
Treaties.
Treatise. Yeah, sorry, my Italy English. We usually think that about like if it's a book, but in Asia, it's not always a book. Sometimes it is a sculpture. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's a series of sculptures. So that is that connection with the tradition that inspires the art form nowadays. And also especially in India, but in all Asian theater dance, another uh, treatise, text, like aesthetic text, is the teacher. Like the teacher is part of this tradition. So it's not only the book, it's all of these things together. So that's lovely that you said that, because it's like if creating your Indian fusion, you're still connected with that source,
Yeah.
uh, which gives you the inspiration.
Yeah.
So it's very lovely.
Yeah, and I think it's like that's so interesting that you're pointing that out. I really feel that. And I want to draw from that because it's so rich. And I feel like, a lot of times I see people approach Indian fusion just kind of, or even Bollywood. Sometimes you're like, where did they come up with this idea? It's very cliche and kind of, like where actually is the connection? There, for me, there needs to be a subtle connection. And one genre, I can say, of Indian history, or just a connection point, is the Mughal period of India, where there actually was this synthesis of Persian, um, you know, Islamic art culture merging together with Indic traditions, and like the music. It really intuitively, there is a connect. There's a historical connect. But I feel like that's a point that is still alive in Rajasthan. And so Rajasthan being a place that I really feel intuitively that fusion, there's many connection points that, you know, that merge seamlessly, because they're ringing like a treatise. The architecture, the painting, the language, the music is kind of ringing with this previous fusion that had already happened in the Mughal times.
Yeah, yeah, that's lovely. To see not a boundary, but a point of connection. So it's not like it's closed. It's
Yeah.
actually very dynamic. So it's a relationship between different languages, and you can see the point of connection between those. And
Yeah.
it's just another way of thinking, reimagining two different things. They're not different. They're actually, they can talk and they can recreate something. So yeah. So the last question, which is probably I love to ask this question to the people I talk with, is again an advice or maybe a general idea you might give as a suggestion, an advice, something you feel to our fusion world. Like, how do you see? Maybe we already pointed a little bit of this before in the previous one, but what would be your suggestion to move forward with this dance form, and what do you see ahead?
Hmm. Um, well, it's a really hard one. That's the hardest one. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel qualified to give advice to an entire field of dance or community, but I guess the advice I give myself is to get involved in this conversation that is happening, because I'm going to use that analogy of the crystal again. It's a side, it's a face of this art form that hasn't been brought to light so much. And it's been kind of, these subjects that are being talked about have been beneath the surface, but conveniently suppressed. And I feel really excited and hopeful. It's just, I think it's an awakening of, um, everybody asking themselves, why are you doing fusion? That was something several artists in Gathering at Delta mentioned. The Menat dancers were saying, ask yourself why you need to do fusion. And I also feel I have asked myself that question, as I said, every day in the last few decades. But I also ask students, why are you doing this? You want to harm people with this art? You want to marginalize people? You want to offend people? You want to be selfish, or you want to be generous, or you want to, um, what is it that is the value you're finding in it? And just simply asking ourselves that question: why are we doing this? How does it make people feel around us? How does it make me feel? I think just igniting that moral compass is huge. It's a huge work. So um, the ignition switch is on now, and I think that's makes me feel very hopeful for the community. I think we'll see a lot of changes uh, coming from this questioning, not just in regards to cultural appropriation and cultural sensitivity, but also in choreography and in complexity of the art form and the presentation of the art form. Because if we start asking ourselves questions, it doesn't stop with one question. We have to also examine, if you're getting serious about cultural responsibility and stewardship, you're probably also going to start asking yourself about, I don't know, costume choices, and how this dance is, you're more serious about your dance, so you present it more seriously. And Fusion Bellydance has been presented in a very specific way. No judgment, but it's been presented in a very specific way, in a way that has made me uncomfortable many times in my career. Like, like not comfortable with the way other people are presenting themselves on stage, and me being in the same festival. I think that it's going to create, this questioning is going to ripple out, and we're going to see better shows, better festivals, more curation, not just a fantasy festival, anything goes, everybody get up on stage and do whatever you want, there's no rules. I mean, it's not about rules, just for lack of a better words, there's no moral compass. There's no asking why and deeper reason behind our performances. I think this deep questioning, this phase of deep questioning, is going to also result in more thoughtful presentation, and I can't wait for that. I've been waiting, and I think we've all maybe been waiting, so this is the moment just to step it up. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That makes me think about um, the subticum, like the intention. I mean, maybe this art form we love so much uh, has a lovely way of presenting and structuring the aesthetics. Now, maybe we need to go deeper now, like as you said, to question and really to find our pure intention. Like, why do we dance? Why do we do this dance? And what is happening behind the surface? I mean, the surface can be beautiful or not, but what is really important is what is behind that surface. So to question that, and yeah, and that's exciting. That's definitely exciting.
Yeah, yeah, it's big work.
All right. So thank you again so much for this little chit chat.
Yeah.
It was not little, and actually it was not a chit chat. I think it was a very interesting and inspiring um, interview, and you are an inspiring dancer. And I, when I started, you were one of my biggest inspiration ever. So that's a lot. The possibility to, the chance to talk to you is really like I'm grateful. So thank you so much again.
Thank you. I have to say, you also are such a big inspiration. I just admire your approach that is apparent in your performance, and admire your artistry and creativity, and really like an authenticity in your work. There's something so so special and so pure, you know. It's just always really touching to see you perform.
Thank you again.